people on Fox News attacking an Iraqi war hero. An Iraqi war hero who's committed 25 years of his life, I think it is, to public service to the United States of America, an infantry officer. He was injured by an IED, got a Purple Heart, continued serving America. And because he came forward, and because he's going to come forward today and simply tell the truth, you actually had a panel on Fox News and a Fox News host attacking an American hero.
Yeah, you know, Joe, as you just said a few moments ago, today is a grim day. I understand where you're coming from when you said that. But my view is this is a great American Day because of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who came to the United States with his parents when he was 3 years of age, made a life for himself, spent 20 years in the American military, fought for the United States in Iraq, and as you pointed out, was awarded a Purple Heart. And this morning, among other things that he is going to say this, quote, unquote, "I am a patriot, and it is my sacred duty and honor to advance and defend our country." He caps our country, irrespective of party or politics. That's the real America.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So let's back up and go through what we're going to hear today, because this damning testimony expected today in the House impeachment probe could be tough for the White House. For the first time, House investigators will hear from a White House official who was actually assigned to listen in on the phone call at the center of the inquiry. The New York Times was first to obtain the opening statement of Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, a top Ukraine expert on the National Security Council, who is currently serving active duty in the U.S. Army. He is expected to testify that he twice reported concerns to the NSC's lead attorney. Once after a July 10th meeting in Washington between then National Security Advisor John Bolton and his Ukrainian counterpart, and attended by Ambassadors Kurt Volker and Gordon Sondland. According to Vindman, Bolton cut the meeting short when Sondland started to speak about Ukraine delivering specific investigations in order to secure a meeting between the two presidents. The opening statement continues. Following this meeting, there was a scheduled debriefing during which Ambassador Sondland emphasized the importance that Ukraine deliver the investigations into the 2016 election, the Bidens, and Burisma. I stated to Ambassador Sondland that his statements were inappropriate, that the request to investigate Biden and his son had nothing to do with national security, and that such investigations were not something the NSC was going to get involved in or push. Vindman says the second time he reported concerns was after he listened in on the July 25th phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. Vindman is expected to tell lawmakers, quote, "I did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen, and I was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine. I realized that if Ukraine pursued an investigation into the Bidens and Burisma, it would likely be interpreted as a partisan play, which would undoubtedly result in Ukraine losing the bipartisan support it has thus far maintained. This would all undermine U.S. national security." I will say once again, the second or third time now this has happened with these career diplomats, these patriots coming forward with what they saw and heard.
With what they saw, and again, it's so important to remember, we're talking about one of the most beleaguered countries in all of Europe that's been invaded by Vladimir Putin already. And there were threats that the invasion would continue to go westward toward Kiev. So this is not a theoretical discussion. I mean, this was actually a country that desperately needed defensive weapons. They were in the middle of negotiations on releasing prisoners. They're in the middle of negotiations on how they move forward without war. And those defensive weapons that Donald Trump was holding up and that his administration was holding up were critically needed to keep Ukraine democratic and free. And yet Donald Trump was willing...
People alive.
And to keep people alive. That horrible scene looking over the bridge, knowing that people would die because those weapons weren't coming. So, you know, James Fallows, this is, I will say, one blessing of the Trump administration is that, at the very least, it has provided us with some clarifying moments as to the underlying nature of political parties. I am no longer a Republican. And an underlying nature of career civil servants, and also people that we may not agree with ideologically. And I mentioned John Bolton, who here, once again, we have an example of John Bolton calling it into a meeting, talking to his people, saying, hey,
wow,
we're not going to be a part of this drug deal. Go talk to lawyers immediately. And whether it was John Bolton or the lieutenant colonel or Bill Taylor, there are still Americans that serve this government of all ideological stripes who actually put their country first.
I agree. It's been fascinating in the past week and the past 6 months or so to see, as you say, on the one hand, both career civil servants, military people, intelligence world people, State Department people who say, I've been here before this era. I think this is right. This is wrong. I'm going to stand up for what I think is right and call out what I think is wrong, even if it means I'm going to be personally jeopardized. I might lose my job, et cetera. We're seeing that also now from some people who are more politically involved, like Ambassador Bolton would be certainly the clearest example. I think there's no foreign policy issue on which I personally have agreed with him, maybe ever, but I really respect the way that he was standing up for what he thought was the duty of somebody in his job. On the other extreme, we have this daily calculation of what, if anything, will finally exceed the elasticity of the GOP Senate to rationalize away the new news of each day. You know, back in the Watergate era, there was this sense that finally there was more than the Republicans than the senators would swallow. There was John Dean's testimony. There was Alexander Butterfield about the taping in the White House. And presumably there will be some point at which this, you know, the stretching and stretching and stretching of the GOP and the Senate might finally reach its bursting point. But I'm not sure that it would be rash to assume that even this is that stretching point, even though it's more than what John Dean said or what Alexander Butterfield said. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, and we can look even beyond Congress, the Republicans in Congress, and look at what happened last night when the lieutenant colonel, an Iraq war hero, an American patriot, was accused on Fox News of possible treason, possible espionage. I want to play this real quickly and get your response, James.
But get this. This is buried in the New York Times piece tonight, but I found it very interesting. He's a decorated colonel, by the way, in the Iraq War. But because Colonel Vindman emigrated from Ukraine along with his family when he was a child and is fluent in Ukrainian and Russian, Ukrainian officials sought advice from him about how to deal with Mr. Giuliani, though they typically communicated in English. Now, wait a second, John. Here we have a U.S. national security official who is advising Ukraine while working inside the White House, apparently against the president's interest, and usually they spoke in English. Isn't that kind of an interesting angle on this story?
I find that astounding, and you know, some people might call that espionage.
Oh my God! The idiocy, James. I mean, first of all, to our gentle viewers from Fox News, Albert Einstein immigrated, I believe, from Germany and helped the United States of America win World War II. Another thing, unlike Germany during World War II, Ukraine is a democratic ally. And what helps Ukraine helps the United States of America. But James, it is breathtaking. It is astounding that an Iraqi war veteran a hero, a man who got injured, got a Purple Heart, and continued to fight for this country and work for this country after his service in Iraq, is now being